City Sounds. Creating podcasts, creating podcasters.
Hello and welcome to the City Magazine Show, a weekly variety show of arts, interviews and more. I'm Max Aadan.
And I'm Elly Young. On our first episode, we're all about reviews.
I spoke with Hannah Grieves about our favourite films of the week. We'll talk about A Complete Unknown and To a Land Unknown.
We will then hear from people about which film they think is totally overrated.
Finally, we'll hear from BBC film critic Rhianna Dhillon about terrible movies we love anyway and what makes a good film review.
Okay, ready and action.
Hi Hannah, how are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm right, thank you. So I heard you've been watching something this weekend. What did you end up watching?
I ended up watching A Complete Unknown. It's the James Mangold biopic about Bob Dylan.
How was it?
Oh, honestly, I would give it 10 out of 10.
Really?
Oh, honestly, I've seen it twice.
Twice?
I've seen it twice, yeah. Actually, I'm so glad I saw it twice because I got so much more from it the second time round. First go round, you're just kind of like, oh wow, like this is throwing me back into the 60s. I felt like I was there. I was longing, bearing in mind I'm 28, I was longing for a time I wasn't a part of. It, like, he really captured the feel of the 60s. And then the singing is outstanding. Given they're actors, not singers, especially her name's Monica Barbaro, who plays Joan Baez, like outstanding, just amazing singing. And she said she didn't know she could sing before the film. And then the second time round, like, I noticed so much more detail. The way they portrayed Bob Dylan. Do you know much about Bob Dylan?
Yeah, I know a little bit about him. Yeah. I know that he's one of the biggest songwriters of all time, great musician. Like, it's a time in music that you just can't skip over. Like, if there's a sudden like vortex that sucks certain musicians out of the world, if we lost him, there'd be a lot that's missing.
I mean, he's the only musician to have won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and he's a musician because of his lyrics. Anyway, you come away from the first film kind of thinking like he's a bit of an asshole. After the second watch, I had so much more sympathy for him.
Why did it switch?
Because you realise it's kind of understandable that he's being difficult because he's basically resisting people constantly trying to get him to conform to an identity. And his, like, the message I got after the second watch of the film is that his fight and attitude is really to commit to a life of being able to, like, adapt and reinvent yourself. Whereas, like, Pete Seeger, for example, bless him, lovely guy, just wanted him to be a folk musician, whereas Dylan was acting up because he was like, no, I'm going to be whoever I want to be today. Like, whoever I feel like being on this day, that's who I'm going to be. You're not going to put me into a category. And so, yeah, he is an asshole and he doesn't, like, you know, you wouldn't say he's a warm man, but, like, I kind of respect what he stands for.
So was there something that, if you think back to your assumptions about it, so for example, for me, when I heard that Timothée Chalamet was playing this role like 4 or 5 years ago before they started production, I was kind of a bit apprehensive and nervous about it, thinking this is either going to make or break Timmy as a proper movie star.
Yeah.
What did you think of his performance?
Okay, so the reviews are strong. I personally thought, I mean, given that he had 5 years to train for the role, which, like, I think has paid off so much. It was fantastic. His singing was mostly great for an actor that isn't a singer. Yeah, great. I think my main complaint would be sometimes you couldn't understand what he was saying because Dylan's got this affected accent that's sort of, he like mumbles, and Chalamet, like, yeah, you couldn't really quite hear what he was saying sometimes. Now, I don't know how much of that was deliberate, but yeah, I think most of all I would say, yeah, like 8 out of 10.
That's kind of impressive. I mean, I've always thought that biopics, especially about musicians, are kind of tired now. They kind of follow a formula. But from the stuff that I've read and from what you're saying, it sounds like they didn't do that with this film.
No, I was so pleasantly surprised. Yeah. But Max, tell me about what you watched on the weekend.
I saw a film by a Danish-Palestinian filmmaker called Mahdi Fleifel, and it was a film called To a Land Unknown. It's about these characters who are basically stuck in Athens. they've obviously fled a refugee camp in Lebanon, and they come to Athens, and they're kind of in a holding pattern, essentially trying to figure out how they can escape and go to Germany, where they consider it the promised land. They have all these like dreams and hopes of what their life will be like. But when you kind of go into the film, you think, okay, this is either going to be one of those like boring films that are like weirdly hopeful and uplifting, but this was anything but that. It felt like a very old school Hollywood film where it's kind of a thriller, there's a bit of drama in it, there's some comedic moments, there's moments where you don't feel sympathy for them at all because of their actions, and there's moments where you feel like your heart is breaking for them. It's one of the best films I've watched this year. Wow. And it's already only in February, I know, but I'm just impressed at how the filmmaker kind of makes you feel so many different things in a very short amount of time. And it's remarkable. It's his first debut feature film. Like, he's done a lot of like documentary filmmaking and made loads and loads of short films. He even studied here in London, actually, at the Royal Holloway University. He studied screenwriting there, and then he went to the National in Beaconswood. It's such a great form of storytelling. Yeah, it's they have like a bit of a height. Like, there's like a bit of a crime element to it, which feels it feels like a comedic part of the film, even though it's kind of dark, and it's such an interesting way of doing it. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Well, that sounds like it's delivering on a lot of angles. So did it feel like a documentary? Because obviously his history...
It felt like a documentary in the sense there's certain moments that he just let breathe. He wasn't obsessed. You know how some films, they'll be like, okay, this movie's about these like really sad people in a sad situation. We're going to show you all these like horrible moments. A lot of the stuff he showed you were their mundane parts of their lives, what it was like where they slept, them interacting with their friends, like the humor and in between like the daily connection that they have. But my favorite thing, thinking back to it, was how they're in Athens, yet you see nothing of Athens.
Right.
You only see like the city centre, like the bits that they go to, which is very realistic, because if they are refugees stranded somewhere, they're not going to be gallivanting around Athens doing sightseeing, looking at museums. They're going to be focused on survival.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest selling point for me from what you've mentioned is I love it when films don't just have, like, when there's well-rounded characters and it kind of makes you interrogate your own morality about what you like about someone, even though they've done reprehensible things.
I had to actually do a review for this film, and the thing, I was trying to figure out my entry point into it, right? Like, what's going to be my opening line? And all I kept thinking about, and it struck me in the film actually, was like the phrase desperate times calls for desperate measures, because this film is that. And then I was wondering, what would I do in their circumstances? Like, how far would I go to not only survive, but to get out of a situation that was so desperate I had no help and no support and no one's coming to save me? What would you do?
That is such... And did the ending... Is that what it sort of left you with? Or did it resolve that answer?
No, it's undefined. The ending is unresolved, especially for the characters and where they live, which I thought it's going back to a question about, was it like a documentary? The ending was a little bit like a documentary, because there's no end point to these people's lives, really. They're not suddenly going to get that magic bullet that saves them, or that magic Hollywood ending where all of a sudden they wake up and they're in Germany, and like that's not their reality. And given that the filmmaker himself is from the community he's depicting, it was this like really interesting interrogation of survival, but also being like, it's just what you have to do. You just have to survive till the next day.
Okay, well, you've really sold that to me. I'm going to go and watch that if it's still in the cinemas. So quickly to round up then, out of 10?
Out of 10, I would give it a 8 or 9.
8 or 9, strong. Yeah. Great. Okay, Max, well, thank you.
No, thank you. I'm now going to go watch Bob Dylan movie, so I'll see you later.
Yeah, well, I'm now going to go and watch...
To a Land Unknown.
To a Land Unknown. See you.
See you, bye.
Would you like to talk about a film you hate and everyone else loves?
Yes, I'd love to talk about the Barbie film. I absolutely hated it. It was not my obvious film to go and watch anyway, and I got caught up in all the hype, and I went to watch it, and honestly, it was just, they'd set it up as some sort of, inverted, feminist, whatever. And yet, actually, it was just an excuse to parade different Barbie consumerism in front of us. I thought it was shocking.
Conclave. I was so excited to see it. I thought the costume looked incredible, the sets looked incredible, the colours looked gorgeous. And I sat in the cinema, and the whole way through I was waiting for something to happen. And in the last 3 minutes it did. But really, what was the hype? It was too long for what it was. It had no cause to be that long, no reason whatsoever to be that dark and miserable without having a massive punch at the end, and it wasn't a big enough punch.
I disliked Longlegs because of the hype. It was hyped up, and I just thought it was very boring, and there was nothing to it. Although I liked Nicolas Cage's character, but I felt it was lacking a decent story.
So one film that I think I don't know if I hate it, but I'm not a big fan of it, that everyone loves, is Lady Bird with Saoirse Ronan. So I watched it with my friend, and I was like, I thought this was going to be really deep and profound. And then I watched it, and I was like, I didn't like this. This is kind of whack. I feel like sometimes when I watch some coming-of-age films, I'm like, this is not... I don't know, some things occasionally feel a bit pretentious, and so I felt like I didn't connect with it. But I think she really enjoyed it, so that's good for her.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. I saw it in the cinema in Bristol and everyone was so excited about it. But my take is that when it was basically like a drama about two different generation immigrants and like a mother-daughter relationship being very difficult, and it being this kind of small story of a laundrette and all these tensions and how you kind of overcome like intergenerational differences, whatever. That, brilliant story. Keep it at that. You start going into the bloody multiverse and you've lost me. It had about 12 false endings and I kept being like, be the last bit, end. And then there'd be another bit with sausage fingers, then there'd be another multiverse. And I was like, this film has gone on too long. And I think it's symptomatic of a trend in films that we see recently, where they're all 3 hours instead of an hour and a half. And people have stopped editing and people need to say, you're not an auteur, you need an editor to get in there, stat. Anyway, I think as a small film, it would have been beautiful. As a massive multiverse film, it was trash.
I think the movie that I don't get the hype behind is Inception. Don't get me wrong, it's not an awful movie, but it's like if someone took too many drugs and decided that they were going to make a movie, right? You have to be in it to understand it. And it's like you're in a dream inside a dream inside a dream. And I'm just like, this is too much. It's a fever dream, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible movie. I just don't understand why it's so loved.
I have to say, I really did not get along with Emilia Perez. I watched it on Netflix after it had been nominated for lots and lots of Oscars, and I felt that it was incredibly overrated. My biggest peeve with it is that allegedly it's a musical, but the singing and the dancing are terrible. There's no tunes. And the story is pretty terrible and the characterization is very one-dimensional. I just don't understand how on earth it got as far as it did.
Hello, this is Isabella Anderson, and I have a very exciting guest today. Rhianna Dhillon is a film and TV critic for BBC Six and also a lecturer at City University. Rhianna, with your many years of experience, what makes a good film review?
A good film review is actually quite tricky to get right. There are a lot of elements to it, and I feel like if you drop one, you can still get like a pretty good film review, but it might feel like something is lacking. So for me, a good film review needs to be informative. It needs to be... obviously needs to be descriptive, but you mustn't forget about the analysis. You know, you need to be telling audiences why they should be seeing a film or TV show or why they shouldn't be. And you also need to make sure that a review is entertaining. You know, we kind of talk about quite a lot the film review as an art form in its own right, because some people really enjoy just reading it as a form of journalism or listening to it, you know, if it's on the radio, without ever actually having the intention of going to see this film or TV show, but they still will enjoy the journey that you're taking them on regardless. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot to pack in, but the best film critics and TV critics do it like kind of feels effortless, you know. It almost is like sort of second nature when they're describing a film to you and they make you want to see it. I think you also have to be really passionate about what you're talking about, and that doesn't mean that you have to be passionate about the film you're seeing, because you might absolutely hate it, but you still need to be passionate about taking your listener or reader on a journey.
Yeah, and I guess that can be hard to do without spoiling anything. How do you approach that?
Yeah, spoilers are a big one. I think, to be honest, ultimately it takes practice and common sense. Like if you just have to think about, like, what would you be mad about if your friend spoiled something for you? Would you be cross if they reveal a major character death that doesn't happen until the third act? Are you somebody who, like I used to have somebody who used to hate just hearing absolutely anything about the plot of a film ever? They just wanted to go in completely blind, so the whole review was a spoiler for them. Other people are kind of, they might want like the bare bones of a synopsis, but I think you sort of have to play that by ear a little bit. You do need to tell people what's in the film if there's going to be some sort of, I don't know, horrific body horror scene that people aren't prepared for or don't want to see. They maybe need to be aware of that in advance, but if it's going to spoil it, you need to be really careful with your language.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of responsibility, isn't it? Because you're taking on, also maybe giving them an idea of whether they want to see it at all, right?
Yes. That's exactly what it is. And that's ultimately what it, you are. You're sort of saying, is this something you need to see? Yes, I think it is. I think you must see this. That is my recommendation. Or avoid this at all costs. You will regret every minute of it. Either way, it's valid.
How early in the film do you know if it's going to be a positive or a negative review, would you say?
I mean, obviously, it so depends on the film. Often, I think you know pretty quickly if the acting is good, and then if the acting is good, you can at least forgive other elements of it because you can get swept away in a performance, even if the writing isn't so great. But for me, I feel like if the acting is bad, it takes me out of the film straight away, and I can't ever get over that. And you might have the most perfect script, but if you've got someone delivering it in an atrocious way, then I'm done, I'm out. And I think with that you can tell pretty quickly. There are some films that you might be loving and then it gets to the ending and it just completely loses its way and ruins the entire film for you, and that's really frustrating, and I feel like that's happening quite a lot at the moment.
Is there an example you can think of where the ending ruined the whole film?
Oh my goodness, I mean, there are probably loads. I mean, there are definitely loads. I feel like I saw Mickey 17 last night, which I really enjoyed, like the first half, and the second half I was like, what is this? Why? So that, yeah, I feel like really kind of like screw the pooch right at the end.
I think my example of a movie that I felt like the ending ruined it is like Interstellar, because at the end when they were like, the answer was love, I was like, I hate that. Make it stop.
It's so funny actually, because I can't even remember the ending of Interstellar because I loved the journey so much. So I like, weirdly for me the ending didn't really matter because I just had such a good time with that film throughout. But I did, I saw it in cinemas when it was first released without all of the hype around it that has since, the 10 years since, and I do think that also makes a difference. And then how do you review that, right? Does the first half of a film that is excellent or takes you into a completely different world, does that outweigh the fact that it just didn't know where or how to end it? And does that end up being like a 3-star review? Or like, how does that, that's all these questions you sort of have to ask yourself as a reviewer, even if if you end thinking that was terrible, but you went in thinking this is brilliant, how do you convey that, especially if you are doing star ratings?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because the star rating is a little bit controversial, right? Some people love it and some people hate it. What do you think about it?
I think it's a necessary evil. No, I'm using evil in a very loose sense there, but I do feel like a star rating, I think especially for people who can't be bothered to read a whole film review, it's just a really immediate way of saying, is this worth it or not? 5 stars, 3 stars. I mean, that's what people come up to me. They're like, if they're asking me, how many stars would you give this? I'm like, oh, really? That's all you want to know? That's a bit sad. But I do think that it is just a really easy metric that we're all on board with. We all know what that means. So I guess it's just the ease of it. But it does feel quite harsh to boil down months and months, potentially years of filmmaking with crews of hundreds to 2.5 stars. Do you know what I mean?
It does. It's making a comeback a little bit with Letterboxd, and I feel like I just end up giving everything 3 stars, which says nothing to me.
That's sad. That is quite sad.
I know. I need to have stronger feelings, I think.
But that's the other thing. I feel like people really just want to read extreme reviews sometimes. Like, nobody sets out to want to read a 3-star review because nobody wants to see a 3-star film. You want to either love a film passionately or hate it. So then actually you might end up getting film reviewers who deliberately go for one end of the spectrum or the other just to get clicks on their reviews.
I wanted to talk a bit about, like, we love a bad film. My best example is all of the High School Musical franchise.
Nice.
With this kind of rise in, I guess, nostalgia maybe, or some of these bad films that are so good they're bad, how do you review them?
There's no point trying to put that alongside a review of something like The Brutalist, right? You have to have a sort of different metric because they are trying to do 2 completely different things. I think just being really aware of your audience, you know, knowing that if you're reviewing this for people who are going to watch it and love it regardless, there's no point reviewing it as if it's high art. And it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. We shouldn't hold all these films in kind of up to the same standard because we don't want that all of the time. So yeah, I think just having a real awareness of your audience of what they want this film for, and you know, saying it's okay to say that it's a terrible one of those films, but also there are, like, for example, my one of those is probably She's the Man, is I think one of my favourite movies. I mean, it's also terrible. Like, it genuinely is terrible. And, you know, Vinnie Jones as a soccer teacher and Channing Tatum flirting about cheese. Like, objectively, like, there are, like, terrible moments in this film, but it's one that you just, like, you want to clutch your best friend and, like, quote along with. So I think if you're able as a reviewer to tap into the mind of your audience and understand what works, and I think it helps if you were there at the time. You know, like with the High School Musicals, like, if you always loved them, and you're not just coming at it now, like if you're getting like a 50-year-old guy to review High School Musical now, he's not going to be able to do it in the same way, right? I think knowing your strengths as a reviewer is vital.
That's very good advice.
Scenarios.
Yeah, because I feel like I remember in high school, everyone used to go see like The Room in cinema,
Right.
and I think there's like a real joy to that, even though it's like every choice is the worst possible choice any human could make.
That's a great example. Like, and especially that becomes like a cult classic with people like throwing things at the screen, and it becomes like event cinema. And that was never the intention, but also people now love it in just such a, I don't know, just a really lovely kind of way as well. Like, they've really embraced the naffness. I think embracing the naffness is so important.
Pull out quotes.
I do feel like critics can sometimes be so snobby that they miss these things, and you know, it's important to just not like leave your audience behind or get left behind if you're a movie reviewer and miss something like that. Like, you know, The Room would have been reviewed terribly at the time, but there were clearly people who saw something in it.
Yeah, I feel like my like former partner and I, we used to have this metric that's like, is it a good film or is it a good movie? And they can both be good, but like in different ways.
Which is is the movie like the
movie is High School Musical, and the good film is like The Brutalist.
The Brutalist, right.
Yeah, because I can love also like a Netflix drama sometimes, which, you know, should I don't know, but
but it's like, I mean, not to use like the really like obvious comparison, but it's like steak versus nuggets. Like, you can't have steak every day. Sometimes you need nuggets.
Yeah, because sometimes at 10 p.m. on a Friday, I don't want to watch The Brutalist.
No, I would not advise starting The Brutalist at 10 p.m. on a Friday.
Okay, so because you watch films professionally, how can you enjoy a film on the weekend? Does it take away for you at all, or does it make you love it even more?
No, I don't think it does anymore. I think maybe when I first started, and you know, you were kind of really having to think and work at how do you analyse a film for an audience, and you know, what would I say about this person's performance or the script, or you know, you're trying to pick up on all these little bits. Now, however long into it. I've been doing it 14 years. No, I am absolutely happy to watch film, TV show. I think what I do miss, what I used to do all the time, which I've done so much less as a reviewer, is go back to all of my old favourites that I used to watch, like monthly, yearly, whatever. You know, like I really miss watching A Knight's Tale because I used to watch that on repeat, and I really miss watching the BBC's Pride and Prejudice, like all 6 hours of it, just anytime I got my period. Do you know what I mean? Like I just don't have time to do that anymore, and that makes me quite sad. So I would like to kind of fall back in love with all of my nostalgic films. Like I miss Aladdin so much. I need to just go and sit with Aladdin for a bit.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you're watching a film for pleasure now, you end up like subconsciously reviewing it?
Yeah, a bit. Yes. But that's fine. I think you're just kind of reviewing it with your mates in the pub afterwards. And it's always quite fun to hear other people's opinions. Because sometimes you can get in your little bubble about things, and then you remember that actually know that it's important for to hear like your audience's thoughts as well, even if your audience are your mates. So I really like just going, like taking a friend to a film just for fun.
Thank you for listening to the City Magazine show, created and run by City St George's Podcasting MA students.
If you liked this episode, check out our other shows. Pod Gold features exclusive interviews with podcast industry experts and gives you an exciting look into the industry.
Whatever you're into, there's something here for everyone. To find out more about future episodes, you can follow us at City Sounds on all platforms.